It got really quiet when we walked in.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Is this close enough? I think it is. Oh.
How is everyone? Are you wearing shirts that say Stacey?
Oh, that's so
Incredible.
cute. Right at the front.
Yeah.
It's such a delight to be here tonight on Woiwurrung and Wurundjeri country to speak with Stacey McEwan and Tigest Girma. Oh my God, Tigest Girma.
You're
so
fine.
Sorry. About Romantasy. So I have a little bit of housekeeping to get through first, and then we'll get into some questions. For Q&A tonight, we'll be using Slido. So around the room, you will see QR codes that you can take with your phone, or you can log in. The code is Romantasy to get in, and all of those questions will come up here. So we're not giving you a microphone, I'm afraid. I will be navigating that myself. But you will have the opportunity to meet both Stacey and Tigest at the back of the room after the session, where they will be very happy to answer most of your questions. Let's set boundaries here. It's really important.
We'll try, yes.
And sign books as well. When it does come to questions, though, we have a special treat. So many of you will have seen the social media post that was offering up 2 advance copies of
Eternal Ruin.
Eternal Ruin, which isn't out until October, to the distress of everybody in this room.
Oh, sorry about that, guys.
We actually have a 3rd copy.
Yes.
And for the person who sends through the best question, we will make sure that you get a copy of that as well. So start thinking about your questions now. Send them through to Slido, and Tigest will make the decision at the end.
The very difficult decision.
Very difficult. I'm sure the questions are going to be amazing.
I will make it.
All right, shall we get started?
Yeah.
So I have to admit, in all of the times that I've been up on a stage asking questions like this, I've never been more tempted to ask, where do you get your ideas? But I actually really like my job, and I know that I'd probably get fired if I asked that question. So instead, I'm going to say, Romantasy is an amalgamation, obviously, of romance and fantasy, which are 2 genres that have evolved quite dramatically from their origins in the early 20th century through to now. And they're also 2 genres that are often in conversation with what has come before, with other things that are happening in the genre, but also other things that are happening in the world. So my question actually is, who are you writing back to? Whose shoulders are you standing on? But also, who do you think that your work is in conversation with, or who do you hope that your work is in conversation with? Shall I start with you?
I think Stacey should go first, because it's her first time. It's her first.
Wow, thank you
It's her first
so
Melbourne
much.
event, so
It is. It's
let's go.
Stacey's first Melbourne event, everyone.
So kind. So kind of you. Who am I speaking back to? I'm not sure if it's anyone in this genre that I'm writing back to necessarily. I think I'm writing back to perhaps all the female authors that probably came before us that tried to make it in this genre and were stampeded over. So I think there's a bit of that. But most of my reading background is in like war fiction. And a lot of historical romance. So I'm probably writing back to those authors and those genres more so than in romantasy or in fantasy romance. But you're right, they are often in conversation with one another, and I think there is like this certain thing that romantasy readers are always reaching for, and it's a combination of like this connection and comfort that you get from romance, but this escapism and like this yearning to try and make sense of this very complicated world in fantasy. And I think romantasy gives us all of those things. So I think that's why they're constantly in conversation with one another.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like how you said you write for the people or for the authors that could not write what we could today.
Yeah.
That's very true. Mostly, though, I write to or for the Black girls that I know never got to see themselves represented in the fantasy genre, let alone, fall in love with the, handsome, immortal creature, stuff like that. So whenever I'm writing to, it's always this, I have this image of myself when I was like 16, 15, reading a lot of books, but never saw like someone that looked like me, had beautiful dark skin or, braids. Never had, any sort of connection to my heritage or culture, or even the mention of African fantasy. So whenever I'm writing fantasy romance or romantasy, it was always with the idea of catering to that audience that's always been neglected in the media. So I just want them to be represented and seen in that fantasy romantasy area. That's my answer.
For you, does the fantasy come first or does the romance come first?
Ooh, that's interesting. That's very interesting. For Immortal Dark specifically, because it came at the same time. It was like I could not think of a vampire story without romance, because I was just heavily influenced by Vampire Academy, The Vampire Diaries, Twilight. I was like in that state of mind. So vampire and romance always went together. So when I had the idea, it was, I was watching Twilight, and then the idea came to me, like, what if vampires originated from Africa? And there's romance, of course. It came very organically together. So I can't even tell you which one came first, because I was like, if there's a vampire, she's going to be falling in love or trying to kill him. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Stacey? Which one came?
Well, here's the thing. You said something really interesting, and I think this is a universal experience for all romance-leaning authors, right? You said, what if there's vampires, they originate from Africa, and there's romance? We put that at the end of any sentence. Yeah. So we could be like, what if there's a train crash and also romance? Like, what if, do you know what I mean? Like, this is how we write books. So for me, it's fantasy first. Like, I have this world, and it will always start like that.
Maybe you're right,
Yeah, like, what if there's like a plane, and then there's romance? You know what I mean? Like, you could do that with anything, and this is the mind of a romance author. Is like, what an interesting situation for there to be romance.
Yes, okay. And that way
so
it comes after.
Yeah,
then.
so for me, like with Vernacular, I was like, minds, but romantic, romantic minds, romantic tunneling. Yeah.
Such a good book.
So fantasy for me always first, and then let's make them kiss.
Yeah, she's right. I support that.
Yeah,
you're right.
I love that we share this.
Yeah. It's like the literary version of the fortune cookie game. Like, what if there's a devastating plane crash, but they kiss?
Yeah, they kiss.
Yeah. Tragic and romantic.
I think it's because the romance part is just so hopeful. Like we have such a dark world we create. Yeah. We can't just leave you with that. We need, you needed something to yearn for, to hope for, and that's the romance.
This is my entire marketing strategy, by the way. Right. Where I'm like, devastation, heartbreak, trauma, but don't worry. There you go. I was going to say something more crass, but don't worry.
I get it. Yeah.
I don't think
PG
we put
kissing.
18 plus on this event. Maybe we
should. Is it 18 plus? You should have told me that beforehand, actually. Is it? No, I'm being so serious right now. Is there someone? Am I allowed to swear?
Because mine is young adult and you's adult, so it's like.
I can't see any kids, but then again, it's dark.
We'll just go with, and then they kiss. There's kissing.
That's safe.
Kissing, yeah,
that's safe.
Which is nice. Or cuddle. They cuddle. Cuddling is nice too. Cuddling is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cuddling with penetration.
For Tigist, two kinds of penetration.
For me, it's just biting. Sorry, guys.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
Fangs in the neck. That's it.
Yeah, I meant that.
Yeah.
Stacey, you mentioned dark worlds, and one of the things that I think is really interesting about both of your books is you both written plots that are moral, yes, legal, no, situations where your characters are thrown into truly impossible situations, but they come through because they have their own moral center, they have their own goals, and those goals don't always align with
what's allowed.
What our fantasy policeman might suggest is should be allowed. Can you talk to me about writing that kind of story? What is it that draws you to these centers where it's actually, they're quite ethical books, both of them. They're talking about the ethics of what it means to be a person in the world. And those ethics absolutely do not align with what they're being told is the right thing to do.
Well, I think when we write fantasy, usually our job is to imitate real struggle, but in a fantastical setting, and that helps us kind of understand the world a little better. So that's how I sort of view that genre in general. With any fantasy book that I've written, though, I've always come at it from this angle of, like, there are a set of rules that that have to apply for everyone, but perhaps shouldn't, or are particularly corrupt, or just raise a lot of moral questions, and so I really like coming from any story with this idea in general. But with A Forbidden Alchemy, I was just really obsessed with a few things. I was really obsessed with the idea with sort of turn of the century Victorian era England, where all of these like centralized monarchies in Europe were sort of turning to these like quasi-democratic societies instead. And there was this idea that wealth, instead of it being inherited or ordained or married into, that it could be generated independently by a man who had innovation, not the women, because let's be so real, there was progress, but not that kind of progress at the time, but that an ordinary and poor man could generate wealth, and that remains a relatively new concept even now. And it was through unionisation and this sort of thing that democracy started to play in. So I'm really interested in that time period in particular because it raised a lot of questions and people started relying on religion to back up their arguments as to why the system should stay the way it is and why the top 1% should keep their wealth while the 99% should stay beneath. And I'm just really intrigued by that idea because I think it raises a lot of moral questions. So I sort of created a world centred around that in particular. Why should the 1% keep their wealth? What happens if we topple that system? And what ripple effect does it have throughout other systems in society, in religion, in economics, in a lot of different things, in societal structure, in the socio-economics that happens between families. So yeah, I think I just got my nerd brain on and kind of honed in on that idea. And to me, it remains a very morally interesting question even now. Why should the top 1% keep all of that wealth when there's so many who could do with just a little piece of that? And there are answers to those questions, but I had a good time exploring them and letting these characters explore them as well. And I really enjoy having characters that sort of don't really care what the boundaries are in a society and what they legally can and cannot do, and they're willing to sort of topple the system and break all the rules in illegal ways. And to have someone who, like Nina, who's the main character in this story, who was sort of took the take of towing the line and trying to find ways around the system where she could fight it in perhaps more morally leaning ways. So I really like having different characters in a story that are trying to work together but whose values are so different and sort of watching them butt heads, I suppose.
I love that. You know, why should the 1% get to keep everything?
It's a great question.
You have to break it down and burn the world down. And then, so I like books that sort of make you question your own values to the point you're defending a character, like you're making edits for this character and you're sending, messages to your friend saying they're a good character even though, in one scene they're murdering people. Like, how do you sort of justify that? And I've always loved that because if you don't know, my favorite character from the Vampire Diaries universe is Klaus Mikaelson. And Klaus Mikaelson is a vampire. Is a vampire.
Never done a thing wrong in his life. Yeah.
Is a vampire that does questionable things. Like he kills people and he's just not a very good person. And yet I root for him. And I'm like, what does that say about me? So when I was writing Immortal Dark, I wanted to create a character that would sort of push that sort of moral line to the extreme, and yet I don't want the reader to be like, he's awful. I still want them to sort of understand where they come from. So Kidan, the main character in Immortal Dark, she struggles with her inner darkness, as I feel like a lot of women, or specifically Black women, we're not allowed to sort of embrace all of the layers of our personalities. So I wrote her to the extreme end. Like she's a very dramatized version of the ordinary woman. And yet I wanted her to be loved with her flaws. And I was like, who is the best person to teach you how to accept these dark desires you have inside of yourself? And then in comes a vampire that's lived a very long life and is very unapologetic in his skin. And then I put them in one house and locked the doors. And I was like, you have to sort of figure it out because she hates herself because of her inner desires and he's very comfortable in his skin. So it just created a very interesting dynamic for me to play around with that. And the values, they are broken and then they're reformed and they're broken and they're again and again. So and yet she's still a human being, just learning how to live and, you know, become part of the world. And 𝐭𝐡𝐨 University, which is the university where the vampires and the humans exist in my world, that's the place you want to sort of be, you know, playing around your morality. You're allowed to explore different things that you normally wouldn't. So even the world, I was very, it was very purposeful that I picked a world that encourages 𝐭𝐾hidan's inner sort of twisted ideas about the world, to sort of push it and bring it forward. So the philosophy classes she has and the encounters she has with her friends, the study partners she makes, all of them challenge her values and make her sort of reaffirm them or completely discard them and try again. So yeah, I really love morally great world and characters. It's just the best way to sort of tell a story.
I totally agree. And then they kiss.
That is true.
Actually, you raised a good point, because I wanted to talk about the role that education plays in both of your stories. So, Stacey, your story kind of almost starts a little bit after they've graduated from university, and then things happen. I'm trying very hard not to spoil. But Tigest, 𝐒𝐿𝐵 plays like an enormous part, not only in the setting of the world and in creating a confined space that the characters have to navigate, but it's also 𝐭𝐻𝐻𝑒dan's first opportunity to meet other people like her outside of the very closed existence that she leads before then, the quite quiet and hidden existence where she has to figure out who she is in the world, as opposed to who she just is in this tiny little box that she had to be living in. And that, I think, is a really interesting journey for her as well.
Yeah, definitely. 𝐭𝐡𝐨 University was, I say it's made for 𝐭𝐻𝐻edan. She needed it to survive before, because this is not a spoiler, in the first chapter, she locks herself in her apartment and she's just ruminating and, you know, planning very dark things for her life. She doesn't see a future for herself because she's committed a very dark act. Like, she's killed someone. Let's just say that. And then how does she move on from this point? Like, what is the one thing that can save her? And it's 𝐭𝐡𝐨 University, because there, where vampires and humans coexist, the students have to study philosophical texts, like they have to attend classes. All that sort of push them to sort of become who they were always meant to be. So if you can't graduate from that philosophical class, you can't have a vampire companion for life. And 𝐭𝐻𝐻edan, who has always hated this part of herself before she enters the university, which is that she thinks she's an evil person, suddenly in that dynamic, in that world, in those classrooms, with each lesson, she sort of learns that, no, there is a space for me in this world, and I don't have to sort of end my life, or I don't have to sort of let go of who I am. I can embrace everything and still be loved and still have friends. So everything was very purposeful in that regard of, you know, the education system sort of saves her life. Yeah. How about you, Stacey?
Yeah, with Nina, it's not exactly
not
the
that
same.
way, is it?
No, Nina's, I mean, at the university for Nina is, it's constricting. She has to leave before she has any opportunity to really understand.
Yeah, well, there's these two weird paths for Nina, which is, the first is that she's determined to get into this school that she doesn't belong in. And she quickly learns, and again, without spoiling, she quickly learns that, in fact, it doesn't matter how much she wants it, it wasn't meant for her. And so that if she wants to get in, she's going to have to swindle her way in to that school. And she, when she manages it, she also then quickly learns that she's been raised in this one kind of dogma her whole life, and now she's switching to the extreme opposite side. So she's an interesting character to write, because in this world that I've created, there's these two sort of radical sides, and now she's been raised in both of them, right? So she was raised in one from birth until like 12 years, and then from those are her formative years. And then 12 to 18, she's raised on the extreme opposite side of this, where the propaganda she's being fed and their views and values are completely different. So she's kind of has to and is forced to ignore this foundation of beliefs that she's been raised with in favour of this place where she's just desperately trying to fit in. And shirk this other part of her, whilst also recognising that lots of what they're saying doesn't ring true for her, and is false, and it doesn't feel correct, and it doesn't feel right, and it raises more questions than it answers. And so then there's this exit plan for her, right? So it's this strange trajectory where she forces her way in, but then she also forces her way out and lands somewhere in the middle. And I found that really interesting, that these two very, very different, extremely different sets of educations have forced her out and somewhere in the middle where she ends up in no man's land and she becomes like this war-shy neutralist. And I found that very interesting. And like my background's in teaching and education, and I can see where teaching and education does a really great job, but where it also lacks. And I usually like exploring that in lots of books that I write. So whether I like it or not, usually teaching comes into it by accident.
Hey, we're actually very similar.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit of a teacher too. Wow.
Do you remain a teacher?
Sorry?
Do you remain a teacher?
Yeah, I am a teacher, sorry.
Is it like currently?
Yeah. Are you a teacher?
Condolences. I left a year and a half ago, and I'm doing this full time now.
Yeah.
So
no, I
carry on,
do
soldier.
like, what is it called? CRTing, which is like substitute teaching. So
it's worse. It's so hard. Oh my God, they're so mean.
But sometimes you go into
what?
class and it's very it's different to your everyday writing.
Right.
You need a break from writing every day.
100%.
Yeah.
Education is very diabolical right now, which is why I say that. But what I'm finding is that there's slews of teachers leaving across the country, right? And I've not spoken to a single person who doesn't hold the same belief that I do, which is we never lost the love of teaching. We still love the profession, we still love the job, but we did lose faith in the system of it, which is really sad. But it is an interesting thing to write about when you're an author. So thanks, Department of Education.
You said that Nina was a war-torn neutralist, and I think there's something very interesting about Nina because a lot of the female main characters that we see in romantasy, in romance, and in fantasy in general, they're doers.
Yeah.
They go forth and do things. But Nina is an observer. Barring the two things that she does to sort of the two escapes that she makes, first into and then out of this world, are but the only times when she really goes for something. The rest of the time she does sit back. What's it like writing a character like that?
Fun. I also said something about this on Instagram earlier today, but I think there's a couple of things that happen when you write romantasy now, and it's because there's these two main themes that most romantasy books tend to stick to, and why? One, because we love to read them, and two, because they work. And the first is that's a badass FMC and a morally grey MMC, right? So those are the two things that pop up again and again and again in romantasy, and for great reasons. So maybe it's just that we're defaulting to that description, but I said on my Instagram yesterday or maybe the day before that I make this face anytime someone reviews or says to me that Nina is a badass FMC, and I go, what? Where? When? Like, point to it, show me. What does that mean? Because the thing is, she badassed way too close to the sun and was just like, hot, and then she backed off immediately, and she stayed that way, and she remained completely passive, and her plan after that, throughout the majority of the book, was I'm not getting involved, right? Her plan was I'm staying back here and I'm being quiet and I'm hiding, and she's highly sought after by both sides of this war because she has a very rare power that can sort of tip the scales on either side. And knowing this, rather than pledging to one side or another, she remains neutral and goes, I think you guys both suck actually. And I've lived both of these extremes, and actually none of you are right. And so perhaps that's where her badassery comes from. But I'm saying it in terms of like this person who's like, no, I refuse to follow one side or the other blindly. She kind of doesn't have that view. For her, it stems from fear. She doesn't want to be captured or used or convinced or persuaded to either side. And in actual fact, going too deep into these two separate opinions and these two different sides of the war has left her feeling uncertain and fearful, and her path through that is passiveness. So whenever someone says Nina is a badass, I'm like, there was that one time when she was 12 where she cheated her way into a school, and there was that one time though where she ran away from everything and she stayed gone for a very long time. And this is a trilogy and it's the first book, so whilst I don't blame people for going, oh, she's a badass, I go, you're jumping the gun, she's not yet. Give her some time. Like right now I'm mad at her and she kind of sucks a little bit. And she's got some like growing to do, and she needs to make like smarter decisions. And I don't know how many times when I wrote that first manuscript, I didn't go, no, don't do that. Sound smarter, like you make better choices for yourself. But you know, it's not the way that trilogies go. And I didn't want her to. So that was really fun actually, because I'd written a trilogy before where I had an actual badass FMC, and by badass FMC I mean she carried an axe around and she killed a lot of people with it.
Yeah, I remember.
And that was so great of her, and very moral, and she never did a thing wrong, and all of it was justified. Moral,
yes, legal, no.
But she was convicted from the jump. She had her morals and her values, and she never swayed from them. That was a completely different character to what I'm writing now, who is someone who is actually, in fact, quite easily swayed and is swayed again and again, and this frightens her quite a bit, how she kind of lacks her own individual convictions, and she remains so confused that she just chooses to be, to follow no one. So it's very fun exploring that. And I really didn't want to approach a new trilogy with the same archetype of FMC as well. I really wanted to explore someone who is very different, both to myself but also to who I've written before. So I hope that I've achieved that. But yeah, anyone saying, oh, Nina's so badass for that, I'm always like, aren't you mad? Don't you dislike her just a little bit? Because I do. I mean, I love her, but I dislike her a lot too.
That's interesting to say.
Yeah.
For you to admit that.
Yeah, that's kind of why I like writing it as well, because I'm writing it going, you bitch.
I mean, she's a very frustrating character.
She's frustrating, and she makes questionable choices, and she jumps the gun on so many things. She allows people to change her mind, and she falls in and out of love very, very easily, and all of those things are frustrating to watch on the page.
She's just a girl. She's
just a girl.
Honestly.
But also relatable.
Falling in out of love so quickly. I feel like that's pretty
and then just being like, I think I've just changed all my worldviews because
he's smiling at me.
He does, but he's so pretty.
Yeah, look at his eyes.
He's so pretty.
That's so funny because you went the passive route, and my character Kidan, she's too active.
She's amazing. Yeah.
She
could teach Nina something.
No, but then you know what it is, because we both have to think about our character arcs. We want to start them at one point and then make them grow, right?
Yeah.
I chose the opposite way, which is I wanted her to be so impulsive with her actions. She would just go in. She would not listen. She would not let anyone sway her. She would not listen to anyone. It's just her way or no way.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. That's a flaw in her that I wanted to sort of explore throughout the trilogy. Twins again. So I started her off very, very impulsive, very chaotic. She would go into a room because at the beginning of the novel, she believes her sister has been kidnapped by this vampire called 𝐭𝐶, and she's gonna go kill him, and she's gonna get her sister back, and nothing in the world is gonna get in the way of that. So she makes a lot of mistakes. Yeah. She makes a lot of assumptions, and I hear it from a lot of readers that they can't stand that part. And I'm like, I get it, because it's like the beginning and she's still very flawed, but you have to stick with Kidan. Yeah. And I wanted someone like 𝐭𝐶, the vampire, to meet her at her worst and then still see something of value in her. And that was very important to me. So her actions, her decisions, even though they were not smart and very teenagey, she's 19 in the book, sort of, she has to grow from that. And as the series goes, as the sequel comes out, you will see her become, I guess, more passive. So it's like she sort of becomes she thinks about things before she does them. That's what I want to say. So there's a lot of, I think the frontal lobe's developing.
Also very relatable.
Yeah. So I think as we mature, especially like young girls, we sort of become more cautious. And where Nina is like, I think 25 at one point, right?
Through the majority of the book, yeah. So we sort of follow her very quickly
don't
into
spoil
adulthood.
Me. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, I can understand like how you could be so fiery and hot-headed when you're a teenager and then grow into that maturity as you age. So there's hope for Kida. Don't give up on her.
Yeah, be patient. She's cooking.
Yeah, she's cooking.
Leave her alone.
She'll grow. But yeah.
I don't think she's ever done anything wrong ever in her life.
Yeah, so I would never say I dislike her. I love her for all the things she did.
I adore her, yeah.
Like, I know it's not right, but there's some scenes that I just say, I wish I could have done that, Not in a, not the violent scenes, but I just appreciate. I appreciate her.
I do like that as authors. We sit there going, no, don't.
Yeah.
As we're forcing them to do the thing. Yeah, we're like, don't do it. It's a
completely
mistake.
Opposite us too, in some ways. Like the things she would do is like, it's just like a release. Like it's a good way to sort of,
I also
explore
think
that
if we didn't deviate from our own personal choices as a real human being, we would only ever write the same book and the same
it'd be so
character
boring. If I just wrote,
I'm such a boring person.
There's
Normally,
nothing here. I have to come up with stuff. So
Yeah.
She's gonna be a fiery character.
Yeah.
She's gonna be, stuffed in a room with a vampire. Yeah. Fantasy.
I want to talk
as
about,
she should.
as we all wish that we were.
As we wish.
I want to talk about the conflicts because one of the frankly, there's nothing worse when you have a really great conflict that's set up and then it's destroyed by something that somebody just changes their mind or, I don't know, some character acts completely out of character because the author doesn't know how to solve the conflict. And the conflicts that the both of you have set up in your books are really good conflicts.
Thanks.
They're really hard to see any way through. Genuinely, you reach the end and you're like, well, fuck, I have no idea. So darn, I have no idea what's happened. So when it comes to setting up this world, do you know what the resolution is already? Do you know where you're going? Are you really just hoping you're going to get there at the end? Like how do you set up something that is strong enough to carry 3 books? Because it has to be big enough to carry 3 books. It has to be small enough to really matter to the characters. And you have to have a resolution that's going to reward the people who stay with you for 3 books. Yeah. Sorry, now you both look terrified. I'm really sorry.
You know why? Because we both have trilogies. That's a very good question to ask because, within one book you can plan a good conflict and resolve it. But if it's a trilogy, you got to plan bigger. Yeah. And there has to be a bigger character arc at the end of those 3 books, which is terrifying. I don't know if about Stacey, but it's a bit difficult. With Immortal Dark, I was discovery writing every scene. I had no idea where I was going. And I could do that because I had no sort of contract. I had no publisher. I had no agent. It was just me for like 8 months with this one book. So I could take that time to sort of let each scene surprise me. I knew someone had kidnapped someone's sister, and I knew there was a vampire involved. And then I was like, that's just enough for me. I'm ready to go. So every day I would show up at that page, and I'd discover something new. It was exciting. I'll write it. And it's no surprise, I had to rewrite most of it because in the end, you get there and you're like, okay, this is very interesting, but some of it, there's not sort of a cohesiveness within the conflict. So that's where I had my agent. She would read it and she would give me feedback, and my alpha readers, which are the people that read it first, and then my editor and I revised it for a while. So at that point, my editor was like, hold on, can I see your outline for the 3 books? I was like, oh, okay, you're right. Maybe that would help. Maybe that would help. So that was very helpful, actually. It did help. So I outlined the big conflict at the end of, what would happen at the end of the 3rd book. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. I could see smaller sections within it then, and then I could just narrow down. It's still, though, I don't know if this is true for you, the sequel was so hard to write compared to the 1st book. And I've just sort of done the first draft of the 3rd book, and that was quite easy. So I don't know what it is about the second books in the series. They're very difficult because you don't want to repeat the same thing you've done in book 1. You want to excite the readers and push the chemistry, the tension more, but you can't conclude it.
Yeah.
So it's a very difficult little conflict area to write into the second book. So that took me a lot of rewrites, more than book 1.
Yeah.
And then book 3, I knew what to do. So, but I'm curious to know what your process is with that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, congratulations, because this technically means that you finished drafting your entire trilogy.
Yeah,
now,
thank
which
you.
is awesome.
It's been a journey. Oh, stop.
Which is a huge feat, and I feel like, I don't know if you feel the same, but getting the draft down to me is like this huge weight off, because I
Very much
actually
so.
like quite enjoy the editing
Yeah.
phase, and it
Thank
feels
you.
like you're using a separate brain for it that doesn't get as tired as quickly.
Yeah.
But I tried so hard not to write a trilogy this time. I truly did. I wanted it to be a duology. I
Somehow.
outlined a duology, and then
Oh.
I made the conflict to conflicty, and it got
So you needed it to
and then I
breathe.
got real messy, and I got to the end of book 1 and was like, and the end. And then I was like, how am I going to
Wow.
fix all of this? There's so much broken that needs to be fixed. And so I readdressed my outline for book 2 and was like, this is going to be like a 600-page monster book, and
Wow.
I don't know if this is kosher to say, but publishers do not like 600-page
No, they
books.
don't. Oh.
They're very expensive to produce, and they're difficult to put on shelves because they're so thick.
Yeah.
So I thought about it really hard, and to me it seemed a little strange that I would have this like 250-page discrepancy between book 1 and book 2. So I found a nice way to, and by nice for me, not you, a nice way to finish book 2 and open on book 3.
Wait, so is book 2 done then?
So book 2's done.
Wow.
But it's being edited. But its drafting is done, and I'm sort of in like second phase edits, and now I'm drafting book 3. So the answer to your question is I plot. Yes, I know what the resolution is. How we get there is sort of the fun part for me. So I usually give myself like plot beats, and I know in broad terms how all of book 1, book 2, and book 3 is going to look.
Yeah.
And then when it actually comes down to sitting and writing each book, when I get to that book, I start to flesh it out a little bit more in my planning, and then I just kind of go for it. And then at some point, I and the characters disregard the plan, and
very real. Very real.
and everything gets very messy for a little while. I have an existential crisis, a panic attack. I consider quitting. I don't.
I love it. Like the cycle is always the same. That
so
doubt,
just your average
self-crippling
experience.
doubt.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, I could do this, and then no, I can't. What am I thinking?
Yeah.
Repeat.
So one of my friends who is an author as well, anytime she gets asked the question like, what's your process when you're a writer, she goes, it's this. And except she actually screams into the microphone, and it's very funny every time. And I'm
she
like,
screams it out.
But truly, I'm like, that's the best way I can possibly describe anyone's writing process. Is just like, and then somehow the book finishes,
fantastic.
and you're like, oh, that was fun.
It's a treat.
Yeah, and you're like, I like this job.
Yeah. It's always when you actually hold the book in the end, you're like, oh, okay, we did this.
And then we come to things like this, and we're like, this is my passion. This is my love.
Like, okay, suddenly the
adore
past
this,
year of pain and suffering is like gone. You're like, oh, let's do it again.
Yeah, you're going to suffer, but you're going to be happy
about it.
Yeah.
I love that.
I have about 2 minutes left before I'm about to throw to the audience. So just remember that there is an Eternal Ruin arc, that advanced reading copy that is up for grabs for the best question. I have my iPad right here that I'm going to scroll through in a second. But in the meantime, I have 2 questions left. The first is, I think it's time we start talking about kissing just a little bit before we finish. So obviously, all of the plots are, what if magic and awful power structure, but kissing?
But kissing, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And we have what if super dark university and weird vampire structure, but kissing. Actually, you know what? That's my question. Just go forth from there. Tell us about your world in kissing.
Oh, you want us to like pitch our books?
Yeah, tell us about the pitching about it.
Go ahead.
Take it. Okay, so this takes place in a world called Belvedere Trench, and it's a population divided by the magical and the non-magical, and our two main characters, Nina and Patrick, meet for the first time when they are 12 years old at a ceremony that will decide which they will become, an artisan, which is a magical person, or a craftsman. And instead, they accidentally uncover a devastating national secret that sets off the first ripples of what will become a widespread revolution, but also separates them, and they don't believe they'll ever see each other again. But they do, except now they're adults and they're on opposite sides of a raging class war that they themselves accidentally started as children.
Such a good book, guys.
And kissing.
I'm halfway through. Yeah, and then actually, don't spoil me, but is there kissing?
And kissing.
Okay, there's a little bit. Okay.
And you'll never guess who kisses either.
Whoa. Okay, that scares me.
It's Nina and Patrick. Yeah.
Okay, so Immortal Dark. Wow. Okay, let's do this again. So Black Vampires meets Dark Academia in Immortal Dark. And I say those two things because they're my favorite things. And I just wanted to combine them together. Oh. And it follows Kidana Dana, who believes a vampire has kidnapped her sister and taken her to 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞 University. So Kidan, who has lived far away from the society, infiltrates that university and decides to bring this vampire to justice. But turns out she actually has to live with him and go through the education system in order to be sort of spying around and finding out what happened to her sister. It's difficult to do so because she really hates him and she wants to kill him right there and then, but there are laws and structure within this lawless place. And she's just waiting for the day to, get rid of him and bring her sister home, and that's her journey. Is there kissing? I would say I would give you this little bit about the vampires in my world because they sort of are, I kind of reimagine them as my own. So they originate from Africa and they have their own ways of living and dying. So when a vampire bites a human being, depending on which body part they bite, there's an exchange of memories. So this is the closest you will get to a kiss in my book. But I feel like it carries enough of an intimacy and tension that sort of, I think, drives readers crazy. They're like, why can't they just kiss? And I'm like, it's just the first book. You have to wait. So that's my little pitch.
That's slow burn.
Yeah.
So it's and biting.
And biting, yes. Because if you bite
Love
someone
biting, yeah.
and then you see into their memories, like...
Intimate biting.
Yeah. Interesting.
Sexy biting.
Maybe.
That's what they should have called the book. Sexy biting.
All right, here's my last question, because we've just spent 38 minutes talking about your books, about power structures, about characters, about conflict. And I'm very sorry to make this my last question, so brace yourselves.
Oh.
In your opinion, why, when we have an enormous genre that deals with David and Goliath stories and injustices in the world and moral yes, legal no, is this a genre that's regularly dismissed as fairy porn?
Oh, interesting question.
Ooh.
Very layered. We've only got 2 minutes to answer this.
You go
Well
ahead.
done. Off you go.
Take 1 minute each. Go.
I think I talked about this recently at the conference, so I am ready. I think to know the answer to this, you have to look back a long way to where the simple act of writing a novel was considered horribly effeminate, right? Because the thinking men wrote philosophical disquisitions and poetry, and they left the women to dabble in their silly fiction. And it only really became cool when the men started trotting out more novels about men doing particularly manly things, and in very manly ways, and whose pursuits were completely undeterred by trivial shit like love. And and even then, the female contribution to the genre was still met with a lot of derision, and it's continued now, and in particular in the times where the women were outranking the men in sales. And I use this disparity of men and women because it's the percentage of the amount of people who write romantasy is glaringly obvious. It's something like 99.2% of romantasy authors are women, right? And have always been. And then it's the same with the romance genre in general. And it's dismissed as being trash. That word has been used over and over again by very, very famous people who, and most of them male authors, who again and again call women's literature trash and feminine tosh and anti-intellectualism and a lot of other really rude arseholic things. And Nathaniel Hawthorne, who wrote The Scarlet Letter, and I memorized this whole quote because it's my favorite quote ever because he's throwing such a man tantrum about it. But louisa may alcott released Little Women, and it set off this like widespread like avalanche of books by women about like domestic triumph and failure, right? And the men considered this so boring because they were writing about war. And they were like, why would anyone want to read about like women getting married and having babies and like, you know, having fights with their friends and, you know, trying to balance the like household budget? That's so boring. And Nathaniel Hawthorne said to like the wide media that America is now wholly given over to a damned mob of scribbling women, and he should have no chance of success while the public is occupied by their trash, and he'd be ashamed of himself if he ever did succeed. And that's my favourite quote because that is the biggest tantrum from a bloke that I've ever heard of in my life.
That's
and
wild.
It boils down to this one thing, like why is it dismissed so much? Because they're obsessed with us. They're so jealous.
I love that.
And this is why they're so jealous. This is $1 billion industry. Romance is $1 billion industry. It takes up so much of the fiction space overall. Why is it dismissed if that's the case? Because we're so good.
Hey,
Haters gonna
that
hate.
was amazing, guys. They are obsessed with us. They are obsessed with us.
I have no strong feelings about this, though. I want to make that.
Yeah, right. No, that was just you just said everything I wanted to say, but better. Good job. I feel like my focus mostly was like on teenage girls and like anything a teenage girl would love or obsess over is just automatically dismissed as.
This is so true.
You know, I had a lot of anger when I came to write Immortal Dark because I remember when I was reading those romance books when I was a teen, or when Twilight came out or when The Vampire Diaries came out, we would just be dismissed as like, oh, what are you watching? You know, that sort of snide comment on that always sort of made me angry. So when I wrote this book, I was like, okay, there's going to be some, you know, great world building. There's going to be some conflicts and there's going to be deep myths and stuff, but there's going to be romance still. I'm going to make you read a romance about a teenage girl and you're going to like it. So I had a lot of anger. So I don't know why majority of people or society says that it's, you know, just dismissive love stories.
Yeah.
I feel like love stories can change the world. I feel like that's how I learned how to be a better person when I was reading about love stories, always. Yeah. So I don't know, what are you reading if you're not reading about love stories? Honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, what are you
that doesn't even
yourself?
compute in my mind. Like, what is better? So yeah, that's my answer.
All right, friends, we have almost 100 questions here. So I'm not going to be able to ask them all, but look, I'm going to do my best. I'm aware of the competition, and I'm really sorry, but there are going to be some. There are going to be some that I'm going to have to like amalgamate because there are people who've asked very similar questions. So you can like duke it out afterwards. We've learned about moral yes, legal no, and I think that this is a really good example of that. Okay,
dance fine.
So this actually relates to the question that I just asked. We have this from a few people who are noting that romantasy is actually used as a catch-all label now for any fantasy written by women, even if it doesn't necessarily have romance or only has slight romantic elements. Related to that is everything written by women is now labeled romantasy, which comes with this nice little misogynistic tinge to it. And related to that is, so the question is, how do you feel about that? But also related to that is people who are asking, you know, most of the people who read romantasy do identify as women or at least identify as not men. What is romantasy doing for advancing gender politics? What is romantasy doing for women? So first of all, how do we feel about romantasy? Secondly, what do you think romantasy is doing for writers and readers within the genre?
Thanks.
You're welcome.
You know, yes, I think just labeling anything what a woman or author writes, labeling it as romantasy is not fair. Like that, I don't like that. I have had a lot of author friends that write just pure fantasy with no romance. And then because they're women, it's called romantasy. And I can see how that's sort of demeaning to them because they're like, the term has been used as just, you know, this, like, I feel like no one sort of wants to claim it. That's what's become, but that's not true. I feel like people that do write a healthy dose of romance and fantasy should claim that, and then women that don't write that should just be called fantasy authors. I don't know why that's very difficult to understand. So a lot of my you know, friends that write fantasy have to post on Instagram saying this is not a romance, to just make it clear that they don't want to be labeled as that. And yes, it's still shelved in the bookstores as Romantasy. So there's some work to be done over there. But what is Romantasy doing for women and for, like, I think girls? I think that's just the question. I think it's making them feel more confident in themselves and like sort of embracing their desires and what they want and what they don't want. I feel like it's raising the bar for what they should expect in men, definitely, or any partner. And I like that. I feel like we have to sort of read and see things so we can sort of believe it can happen to us. I feel like representation is that's why it's so important. So if I see a Black romance with a Black lead falling for a Black guy, I feel like I can visually see that. And if he's treating her very kindly and very protectively, I can, sort of internalize that. So I feel like in that regard, it is changing a lot of women's lives, because it sort of makes them take note of what's happening around them in their lives. And if it's not healthy, if it's not good, they sort of change, or they sort of aim for better things in life, in partners. I feel like if you pick the best partner for yourself, your life will be amazing. So in that regard, I think it sort of helps women sort of, realize what they want.
Yeah.
So.
No, all of what you just said.
Thanks.
For sure. Yeah, it's really annoying having sort of, I suppose, some fantasy authors who can write a fantasy book and there's gratuitous sex, but because they're a mister, then it's a fantasy book, right? And it's a high-end, high caliber, high fantasy book, which requires a lot of like critical thinking and other important things. And then a woman can write a very, very similar novel, and it's classed as romantic fantasy, which is fine, except for the fact that romantic fantasy, romantasy, fantasy romance, fantomance is then is considered feminine trash, feminine tosh,
there's
and less cerebral.
like a connotation to it that we don't want. So.
And lacking in any need to be like critically engaged with it, and when in fact it asks just as many important questions as those books as well. And so there's this weird disparity between fantasy books and then romantic fantasy books, or like whatever variation of that title you would like. And that's annoying. So that's how I feel about it. And what is any romance, and honestly, any romance, whether it's romantic fantasy or historical romance, paranormal romance, any romance-leaning genre is important for people who identify as women, because it does all kinds of things. It boosts our serotonin. It teaches us all the different ways that we can have an orgasm. And I mean that in a very serious way. It teaches us about all the different kinds of abuse. It shows us unique perspectives, diverse voices. It shows us that love is a spectrum. It shows us that there's safety to be found in companionship, and when to get out when that partnership becomes unsafe. And these are all things that historically society would prefer women to remain very ignorant to. And so I think any romance genre is important and cerebral and should be critically engaged with because of that. And it just kind of sucks that it's dismissed as this feminine tosh. But underneath that is this underlying cause of like jealousy, and also that we don't like that the women love it that much. We don't like that they're that happy. Yeah. They might start getting radical ideas like running for office or making positive life choices. And I think that's like I said, I have no strong feelings about this.
We can't have our women thinking and happy.
No, never, and and certainly not both at the same time.
All right, I'm going to ask some easier questions now.
Okay.
What have you learned about yourself and your own values while writing messy characters?
Go
ahead.
I think I've learned that I really enjoy writing characters that have the opposite values to me. I don't know why that is, other than it's just interesting. It's interesting to tease those things out, and I think that it's important as well as a writer to kind of explore those things so that the characters don't remain just these other, these fictional versions of you.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. I feel like when I write really extreme, dramatic characters, like, a girl has to go and live with the person she hates in the world. I'm like, okay, if she can do that, maybe I can get out of bed, sort of thing. I sort of think they sort of give me courage to handle my day-to-day drama. Like, you know what I mean? Oh, it's an email that I don't want to read, but then, you know, you're writing about characters that are slaying vampires.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
you can read that email. So I know, like, it's like, you're like, what?
This is the
but
truth,
it sort of makes you realize that your life is not as bad. It could never be as bad as a fantasy character. And it's just when because I put my characters through so much trauma, I feel like if they can survive that, I can handle whatever tiny, minuscule thing happens in my life. So I draw a lot of courage from it too. Yeah.
Somebody asks, with Kenan's Ethiopian heritage, how do you balance taboo topics while honoring the culture?
Oh, that's a very difficult question. Interesting.
I'm sorry,
question.
I said I was going to ask easy ones, but
I know.
It's right at the
That's
top.
very
It's got a ton of upvotes. I couldn't ignore it.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, so Kidan, like myself, I'm Ethiopian. I came to Australia when I was about 14 years old. So I grew up in Ethiopia for the first half of my life. And similarly, she is quite, not disconnected, but she grew up in the Western world, even though her roots are in Ethiopia. And there's a lot of mentions to Ethiopian culture, history, throughout the vampires because they originate from there. And she feels disconnected in that space because she doesn't really fit in and she has to find her own ground. The question was like, how do you handle the taboo subjects within that? That's very difficult because I am aware that I'm one of the very first few people from Ethiopian background that is writing in the fantasy genre. So I have to sort of be intentional with what I want to put out there. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of shame culture in a lot of like East African countries. So a lot of things that are very accepted in the Western world would not be in the East African countries. So my way of sort of dealing with that is through a fantasy lens. So I feel like fantasy is the best way to explore those because it gives you protection against real life. So if it was a contemporary novel, it would be quite different. I don't think I would write Kidan like this because I am aware of the cultural implications and the religious implications with my own heritage. But if it's a fantasy land, I feel like I can explore these taboo subjects, which are quite normal in the Western world, but I can sort of bridge that gap slowly, piece by piece, without alienating my Ethiopian readers and so also catering to the Western readers. So it's a very fine line that I'm always navigating. There are scenes that I write and I'm like, oh, if an Ethiopian reader reads this, they might feel some sort of way. But at the end of the day, I have to honor my own vision and I have to sort of come to terms with this book is not going to be pleasing to an entire country and I should not be representing an entire country on my... So I've worked through this a bit. And it's a question I feel like a lot of authors of color deal with because they're expected to represent their entire country and they're just one person. And I feel this way because there's not enough of us to represent the whole variety out there. So I just take it step by step and I consult some of my Ethiopian readers. I have some people that read it early on and see if it can sort of pass their judgment and then I push it out into the world. So thanks for that question. Very loaded though.
Yeah, look, we made a mistake, frankly, with offering up your arc because the questions are too good and we're never gonna get through them. Okay, did we, like rapid fire answers. No more thoughtfulness here. Are there characters who went through major changes from the first draft to final? If yes, who and how in like 5 words?
Go, Stacey.
Oh my God. Yes. Theo, who is a third character, he was going to be very different, and in edits he came up very differently again.
Okay.
I love it.
Yes, Ramin Achsaf, which is a character something happens to, before it didn't. And it was my editor's suggestion to make that happen to her. So sorry, but yeah.
Stacey, yes and no, would you ever do book-related stand-up comedy?
That's so funny.
Probably.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
If you had to choose a song that captured the vibe of your books, what song would you choose?
Okay. Oh. I have Way Down We Go. Wait, is it? Way Down We Go by...
Oh, yeah. Way Down We Go.
That one. But I forgot who
I got
is
you.
by.
Yeah. Neither,
that one.
but that one. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I love that. Maybe... okay, there's a song called Poison and Wine. by the Civil Wars. I think that one, or maybe Peace by Taylor Swift if you're looking at it from Patrick's perspective.
I'm going to listen to that today.
Yeah.
Okay.
What
Break your heart.
aspect of fantasy do you find hardest to write? Magic, world, lore, characters?
Magic system is always, to me, very complicated, and even more complicated is trying to figure out what the magic can't do. And it always lends itself to quite a few plot holes when you miss something. So I find that's always trickiest.
Yeah, I agree with that one, actually. Yeah, magic systems are very tricky.
Sorry, you answered that more quickly.
It was too quick, okay.
In what ways do you draw inspiration from your real life to shape your characters or stories?
I almost never draw like too much inspiration from real life. I like to escape completely, but there's lots of things that I see and read and watch and things that inspire what I write. So for this particular book, it was Peaky Blinders, but also a whole bunch of World War I and World War II documentaries, which I watch, which is really nerdy, but that's just the truth.
I love that.
Yeah, so that was the inspiration. But also, like, if you're writing any book that's, like, even slightly dystopian leaning, you can, like, take your pick of any world event that's happening right now. Any one of them might lead you to understand why an author wants to write about a world that's, like, not going great. But that might get better.
With hope.
With hope, yeah.
Okay. With me, I sort of like to draw from Ethiopian history and myth. And I feel like in a way, it's sort of, I'm discovering it myself as well. There's a lot of Easter eggs that are included in Immortal Dark that allude to things I've found in my research. So that's the only part I'd like to draw on. I feel like I would, if I can, I will always sort of set my characters up to be either Ethiopian or have Ethiopian heritage. And I want to always sort of bring attention to that because that's just what I wanted to see when I was a bit younger and like reading those books. And I know how much you would feel for a young Ethiopian girl to sort of read that book. So I'm always writing with that inspiration, but everything else, it's just the base has to be Ethiopia. Everything else is just my own. So I love that freedom as well. Yeah.
I can't see anybody who's like the boss, so I'm gonna do 3 more questions.
Yeah, they're not flagging us,
I
so.
can't see them
Hurry up,
yelling at
quick.
me about this. All right, 3 more questions. Do you find it hard to write the dark themes? Do you find it emotionally tolling? Do you find it hard to do emotionally?
It's so easy to me. It comes naturally.
Same. I'm so glad you said that
It's so
first.
easy.
Yeah,
It's actually so fun. I don't know what's wrong with us.
Yeah, I was worried that you were going to be like, oh man,
no.
like, you know, I have to really go
it's
to
so fun.
a dark place, and I'm like, not me, every day, all day.
Like I could do it right now.
I could do it right now.
Very fun.
All right, you're both teachers. You're teaching literature class in high school. What books are making it into your curriculum? 2. You can only do 2. I'm so over time.
Oh my God.
Okay, I have one. Kindred by Octavia Butler.
Oh my God, that's such a
Very good
one.
book. And the other one, I'm teaching literature.
I mean, literature is things that people have written. Like, let's not get hung up on that term.
Let's not be too, yeah. So Immortal Dark by Tigest. You got it.
What if you just stand up to school that way and was like, we're just going to read this
We're
book?
learning something today.
Oh my God, amazing. I can't do that with mine. I teach primary school kids.
I teach primary. No, she said high school.
Kissing.
She said high school.
Oh, I said high school.
I would
Same with mine.
probably, like, my very serious answer is like 1,000 Splendid Suns or like The Kite Runner by Khalid Hosseini. I think those are very, very important books. And they were the type of books that when I read them for a first time, when they came out, were like mine, you know, it altered my brain chemistry. And the way I went about, and the way I went about writing books as well. So probably something like that is my very serious answer, and my very unserious answer is probably going to be like unpacking the Little Women over and over again just to spite Nathaniel Hawthorne, because what a dick for saying
Have you? Okay, sorry, now we're really going off script. I'm so sorry to the Wheeler Center. I was really disappointed when I read Little Women.
Don't say that to me right now.
I'm so sorry. I wanted to love it because, like, I grew up on Anna Green Gables, and then somebody handed me Little Women, and was like, "This is the same," and I was like, "Not the same book."
Oh, as Anne of Green Gables?
Yeah.
Well, no.
Vibes very different.
Yeah.
And I've never quite gotten over the disappointment.
No, there's like
because you were looking for Anne,
death
and
there's like death and scarlet fever
And also, they
poverty.
like played Pilgrim's Progress, and I was like, "These girls are really boring, and I don't understand why."
Well, then I changed my answer to like Percy Jackson.
All right, that's fine.
There you go.
And the very last question is, in both of your books, love makes characters act against their moral instincts. So do you see love as a force that redeems, corrupts, or magnifies existing flaws?
All of the above. All of the above.
All three.
My favorite one is love corrupting people.
Oh, me
though.
too.
That's, hey,
We're
hint
sick, you
for
and
book
I.
3, love corrupts.
Oh my. We need therapy.
Yeah.
All right, that's a perfect time to end.
That was great. Oh, thank you. Thanks, Kate. That was amazing.
All right. Just a reminder that Stacey and Tigist are going to be at the back with signings. We have special samples for those of you who aren't going to get your hands on Eternal Ruin. Actually, I have to be very honest. Nobody's getting their hands on Eternal Ruin tonight. The books are somewhere in Melbourne, but they're not here in Melbourne. So the person who Tigist is about to announce as her favorite question is going to have to make yourself known to the Wheeler Center staff at the back. They will get your details, and your book will, when your book arrives here, it will then arrive at your place very shortly after. So signing at the back.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to both of you. This was such a fantastic conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. You've been a wonderful host.
I didn't have to do anything. You guys talked to yourselves. This was
No.
all right. It's the big moment.
Okay, so
Best
me
question.
and Stacey have sort of agreed, and I think the Ethiopian question about how do you balance writing a story that sort of doesn't cross into those taboo lines, or how do you purposely cross into those? I think that person, whoever it is, make yourself known to someone at the back, and they will email you Eternal Ruin, the early copy. So thank you for that.
Thank you.